and Marlborough following a serious accident. And there are long queues on the M27 eastbound in Hampshire, partly due to the works just before 7 at Hedge End, but not being helped by an earlier broken down lorry. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you're thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very, very good evening to you. It's Tuesday, the 21st of January, and I'm Martin Daubney. I'm filling in for the big man, Nigel Farage. On Farage tonight, the government launches an inquiry into the Southport murders as the Prime Minister says the tragedy of the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain. But seriously, haven't we heard all of this before from many, many successive leaders? I have a former Home Office Minister with me in the studio next. Plus, I'll be speaking to a former Prevent officer about how Axel Rudder-Cabana was referred to the scheme to stop terrorist violence, not once, not twice, but 3 times unlucky, and still slipped through the nets. Is it time to throw Prevent in the dustbin? And Labour have reopened more asylum hotels after they pledged time and time again to close them down in their manifesto. Now, this comes as 1,000 asylum seekers have reportedly crossed the channel since the start of 2025. Hotel Britannia wide open. And breaking news, Rachel Reeves has made a great decision at last, because it looks as though she's thrown net zero out of the window and put the economy first. But as you'd expect, not everyone's happy. Look, especially not Mr. Windmill himself, Ed Miliband. Not for the first time in his life, he's choking on a bacon sandwich because there are reports Heathrow Airport is set to expand. Put that in your windmill and smoke it. And I'll be joined by a former Environment Secretary on that. All that's come, but first, here's your news headlines, and it's Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock. These are your headlines. The Home Secretary has said public bodies completely failed to identify the terrible danger Axel Rudder-Cabana posed as she announced a public inquiry into the Southport attack. Yvette Cooper said the 18-year-old who admitted carrying a knife over 10 times before his deadly rampage should have faced stronger intervention. She also revealed his case wasn't escalated despite 3 referrals to the Prevent counter-terrorism scheme. Rudder-Cabana has pleaded guilty to murdering 3 girls at a dance class, as well as charges of attempted murder, ricin production and possession of terrorist material. Earlier, Sir Keir Starmer warned of a new growing terror threat, with lone young men now responsible for carrying out extreme acts of violence. Donald Trump has begun his first full day back in office, arriving at the Washington National Cathedral for the post-inauguration day prayer service. The bishop took the opportunity to lecture the new president and J.D. Vance on immigration and the fear felt by many LGBTQ+ families across the country, leading Trump to say that the prayer service could have been better. After his inauguration yesterday, the new president signed a range of executive orders to pull the US out of the World Health Organization and declared a national emergency at the southern border. He also pardoned nearly 1,600 people tied to the January 6th Capitol riots, with some already walking free, including former Proud Boys leader Henry Enrique Tarrio. In other news, a 36-year-old man and a 6-year-old girl have been found dead inside a house in Scotland. Police said officers made the discovery following a report of concern for a person in Haben Drive, West Calder, at about 4 p.m. yesterday. The force said the deaths are being treated as unexplained and post-mortem examinations will take place in due course. Officers said their relatives are aware and are being supported by specialists. At least 66 people have been killed in a fire that engulfed a popular Turkish ski resort hotel, forcing some people to jump out of windows. At least 51 others have been injured in the blaze which erupted in the early hours at the Grand Cartel Hotel. Emergency teams worked non-stop with more than 260 personnel on site, and it took 12 hours to put the fire out. The country's Justice Minister said 4 people have now been arrested, including the owner. And get ready for a wild weather weekend. Storm Eowyn is on the way and it's set to bring severe gales to the UK this Friday. The Met Office has issued yellow wind warnings for northern and western Scotland and Northern Ireland, with gusts of up to 80 miles per hour possible. Expect power cuts, travel chaos and localised damage as the storm rolls in, accompanied by heavy rain and hill snow. It's all thanks to a clash between freezing Arctic air and warmer Atlantic conditions, shaking up the recent calm, chilly weather. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to Farage with me, Martin Daubney. Now, the Prime Minister has moved with unusual speed to authorise a public inquiry into what drove Axel Rudicabane's murderous rampage and whether it could have been prevented. But haven't we heard, seriously, all of this before? Because lest we forget, after the 2017 London Bridge attack, Theresa May declared enough is enough, urging Britain to confront Islamist extremism. Similarly, that man Tony Blair's 12-point plan after 7/7 aimed to tackle radicalisation, and yet 20 years later, it remains almost entirely unimplemented. It seems we're simply going round and round in circles. Britain's struggle with extremism. And let's be specific, let's be honest. This is mainly a conversation about Islamism. It's still the elephant in the room. Will this tragedy finally push our leaders to ask the hard questions, or will they once again shy away from asking those uncomfortable truths? Well, joining me now in the studio to discuss this is the former Conservative MP and the Home Office Minister, Kevin Foster, and of course my panel of the former Conservative MP and Minister, Sir Ranald Jayawardena. Well done, Captain. And also the journalist and the former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown, the wonderful Joe Phillips. Welcome all of you to the studio. Kevin, let's start with you. We've heard all this before. Successive governments promised the grass and nettle. They haven't. It's been a failure. And once again, we have murders on our streets and now having an inquiry. What will the inquiry tell us? We don't know. The entire thing is a disgrace. Children are dead, and it seems to me nobody is taking any responsibility.
Well, the first thing an inquiry will need to ask is the points that will be jumping out of the page to any viewers at home this evening. You know, this man was referred to prevent a number of times. There was violent incidents at school. He downloaded an Al-Qaeda training manual and book. You know, this is clearly someone who was building up to a serious violent incident and then went on to commit an absolutely horrific crime and murders. And I don't think getting into the argument, I think it's been quite odd that it's been argued about whether he's a terrorist or not. Well, someone who downloads a terrorist training manual, who cooks up rice at his home and then goes and attacks innocent people. It rather sounds to me like a terrorist. So there are lessons to be learned. I think one will be the operational side of this, about those who directly engaged with this individual when he was reported. The second will be what are the policy issues that come of this. And let's be clear, lone wolf attacks aren't new. The idea today from the Prime Minister that lone wolf attacks are somehow new. The last two members of Parliament to be assassinated and murdered for their job were both killed by lone wolf actors. And if we really want to go back, the last Prime Minister to be assassinated in 1812 was killed by a lone wolf actor. This has always been the biggest nightmare for any security forces, the idea of one person's there, stewing themselves up, getting ready to attack innocent people.
So why is Sir Keir Starmer saying terrorism has changed? This is the new threat. It's not.
It's not a new threat. Lone wolf actors are there. We can even look at tragic incidents like the Keyham shooting, where someone was clearly had radicalised himself and then went out and committed an absolutely appalling crime. So lone wolves have always been there. They've always been a threat. So yes, it's not something new, but obviously there are lessons to learn. We should have them. And I think it's absolutely right an inquiry's been announced. I must say it's interesting how quickly this inquiry's been announced compared to the grooming gangs one that we should also be having.
I want to ask you a question about this inquiry. I'm deeply suspicious of the veracity of them, of the point of them. I mean, we have inquiries when it seems to suit the government. An inquiry to Southport, no doubt, will throw Prevent under the bus, social services, the police, the schools, the parents, the community, anybody, probably, but the government in power at the time. And we didn't have an inquiry into the rape gangs, because guess what? That one could bring the whole house of cards crashing down. Are these inquiries worth the paper they're written? And we know there have been multiple interface failings. We know that he was driven by this Islamist jihadi Bible. And yeah, he's not an Islamist terrorist, couldn't possibly be that. But you tell me, if this guy had watched, I don't know, a video of Adolf Hitler or Tommy Robinson and gone and killed children, do you think they'd be saying, we can't rush into the causes? He'd be a right-wing terrorist all day long. They're fudging around. What on earth is going on? People don't have any faith in this anymore.
Well, I think, Martin, you're right. We can look back to the murder of Joe Cox, and quite quickly the individual was identified as having far-right motives. He was someone who had made all sorts of comments around it and has then carried out a murderous action as a result of his views. But yeah, I think there is also a line to the issue around what went wrong operationally, what went wrong about dealing with this individual. But there's also, what was the initial communications out to the public? There was a sense that the information wasn't being released. And yes, there was misinformation going on online, but the best way to deal with misinformation online is to put real information out there. And that could have been done, certainly to more of a level that's been suggested, without contempt of court.
Could that have been done in the past by your lot? I mean, we just said there, Theresa May said, no, this is enough. After London Bridge, here we are again. The bodies are piling up. Successive governments have made the same mistakes. Are we just all too afraid to call this out for what it is, in case you're racist? Same with rape gangs. Successive governments have failed to grasp the nettle, and here we are again, going round and round in circles.
Well, we know some were frightened a bit of accusations of racism. We know some of the people who initially raised concerns about rape grooming gangs in their local communities found themselves accused of all sorts of things, and that the priority was to shut up the whistleblower, not to deal with the issue. But I think there is a changing mood in the country, Martin, that we are actually able even to have on this show this type of debate. Even a few years back, if we tried to have this type of debate, probably myself or Rana would be on a TV programme getting all sorts of attacks for how dare we suggest this. But no, we do need to have an open, honest debate. We need to confront some of the issues. And also remember, there's plenty of communities in this country who are absolutely appalled by what this man has done. Okay. But it's how we stop their children being radicalised. All right,
but let's just remind ourselves, Kevin Foster, that you were in power when Axel Radicana went through the books of Prevent, when he was missed by the authorities repeatedly. Nothing was done. So it's not fair to blame the Labour Party. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to hold you to account on this as well. You were in power when this guy slipped through the net, 2019, 2021, all the way through until July 24, when it became a Labour Party problem. Successive governments have simply failed to deal with this.
Yeah, Martin, I'm not going to sit here and make party political points. I think people would be appalled if I did, given the circumstances we're talking about here. So, yeah, we do need to see why when Prevent was in place, why, with 3 referrals, of serious referrals, a school saying this is a pupil who's been violent to other children, and even down to the basics, to the point that this is, I think the day before a taxi driver he wanted to go to his school and attack it. Again, there's a lot of questions to be asked there. Now, let's be clear, I'm not going to make party political points because ministers wouldn't directly consider a Prevent referral, but it is about how we can reform that system.
Do you admit that your party also made failings? Scumbags like this were allowed to stay at large across successive governments.
Well, this will be an issue about what was the challenge here. This is someone, by the way, born here, so of course that would, my old brief of immigration, one of the first things we'd look at in some of these types of cases, is this someone who is here as a citizen, or is this someone who we could look to remove, which clearly in this instance they were someone born here.
Kevin Foster, excellent. Let's bring my panel in now. I'm going to go first to Joe Phillips. What's your take on all of this? It just seems to me like we're just scared to call a spade a spade. It's like, why are we saying, this is the new kind of terrorism? It's clearly... He had a jihadist Bible. He went to a Taylor Swift dance lesson, repeatedly been targeted, Taylor Swift gigs by Islamists in Austria, on the continent. The modus operandi seems to the public to be straightforward, and yet we're told straight away by Merseyside police it's not terrorism. And by the way, if you think it is, you're far right. This was stoked up from the beginning by the authorities.
Well, I think there were mistakes made for sure, and it was the police who very unusually took to putting the record straight when the false information went out that he was an asylum seeker.
But they were wrong. I mean, today...
No, hang on, Martin.
He's a terrorist. Mike Tapp, Labour MP, and the Home Secretary agreed. What's changed?
Because they... On the day it happened, they didn't know that much. They'd got 3 little girls dead. They'd got people lying severely wounded.
Well, they knew before he was charged. They had a 3-day window. Keir Starmer said today he was briefed from the very, very outset. They knew he was a terrorist at the beginning.
I think there is a difference between organised terrorism and somebody acting alone. This is a 17-year-old boy who has been through, as we've just been talking about, through school, through Prevent from year 9. So he was a young kid when he first started getting involved in this. He also apparently had got an awful lot of... he was obsessed with violence, not Islam. He was obsessed with violence. He was looking at genocide from his, family history, from Rwanda. He was looking at other extreme violence. If this was America, he's the sort of kid who probably would have got a shotgun and gone into his old school.
But he tried to do a school massacre the week before.
So I don't think you can say he targeted the little girls at the Taylor Swift dance class any more than he targeted his former school, which he was thrown out of. This is clearly an extremely disturbed, terrible individual. And it is, I think the really important thing is to find out how he slipped through the net, because quite clearly Prevent is not fit for purpose.
OK, Rano, what's your take on this disgrace?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there are 2 big things here. First is that some of the systems that we have in place, whether it's Prevent in this case or safeguarding in terms of the grooming gangs that we've seen elsewhere in the country, I think there's an awful lot of box ticking from those who are often in power. So once they've ticked their box, once they've done their duty as they see it, they can wash their hands of things. And I think we've got to change the culture. The second big thing is, we've got to trust the police. And, some of the bleeding heart liberals that we see don't want to empower the police to take tough action where it's needed, don't want them to intervene early where it's needed, protect the rights of those who want to do us harm against, frankly, the rights of everyone else who deserve to be protected.
Well, that's all well saying trust the police. What about the girls who went and reported that they were being raped to the police?
Well, I'm delighted, Joe, you're coming around to my way of thinking around the fact that there's been 2-tier policing in this country from some because they wanted to protect themselves from being accused of being racist.
I mean, trust the police.
But, that's the sort of mentality, I'm afraid, that we've seen from the left, which is, we can't touch this because someone's got such and such a background.
I think you're absolutely right on the box-ticking thing, and I think I've heard a former independent reviewer of terrorism talking about it today, and one of the problems, and you will know better than any of us here, Kevin, is that in order for something to be classed as terrorism, it has to tick boxes. So you have a teenager who's looking at violent stuff, but is not...
Can I very quickly interject? Why is it that Merseyside police and the Prime Minister were saying you cannot say this is terrorism, but they straight away called everybody far right who got involved?
Well, I don't think the police did.
Starmer did.
Yes, Keir Starmer did.
Why? Was that a mistake?
Yes, I think it was a mistake. And I think, there were an awful lot of people, including Tommy Robinson, who were making mischief and who were fermenting and didn't give a damn about what happened to those communities.
Yeah, but the cat was out of the bag by then. Three girls were lying dead and the attempted murders were there. The aftermath is neither here nor there. We have to deal with what caused this.
Yes, you absolutely have to deal with it. And I do think, with hindsight, that the Prime Minister was wrong to say that. Bear in mind, they'd only been in government for, a few weeks. This was an absolutely very fast-moving, exploding event. And I suspect within the first 24 hours, A, they didn't know whether there were going to be more fatalities or whether there was going to be another event in another city.
OK.
So I think, yes, mistakes were made.
OK, see you there. Thank you very much, Joe, Randy, and of course, Kevin Foster. Thanks for popping into the studio tonight. Much appreciated. Now, coming up, I will speak to a former Prevent officer about how Axel Radicabana was referred to the scheme to stop terrorist violence, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and yet still slipped through the net. That's next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Ironic article in The Guardian, Nick, caring about facts.
Yeah, this is Meta is ushering in a world without facts, says Nobel Peace Prize winner. And they just seem to give these Nobel Peace Prizes to anyone these days. It's Maria Ressa.
Not working.
Zuckerberg came out, and it was very bold. He said a few things. We're going to use community notes instead of fact-checkers. Fact-checkers in inverted commas, because it just means people pushing usually a specific viewpoint. Community notes seems to be a great system that X uses, so why not do that? I think that's great. He's going to reduce restrictions on topics like immigration and gender. Good, because I'm against censorship. He's going to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more, which is great. He's also moving content moderation to Texas instead of California, which is banter. So now the cynical version is he's just realises we've got a new regime, it's the MAGA era, and I want to be mates with Trump, who said that I should that if I interfere with the 2024 election, he should spend the rest of his life in prison. So he did mention he might be a bit scared of that. He was involved in that in Facebook suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, and I feel that he didn't like being a part of all that from watching interviews.
And also the suppression of arguments about gender and sex, what is biological sex and whatnot. You get banned for saying there are two sexes.
They're on the wrong side of this, and now he's correcting. But the weird thing is the people, of course, the people who don't like this, the lefties, this person, Ressa, is saying that this is a big problem. That it's an extremely dangerous time. I've seen all this from the lefties. They just call it disinformation. They're worried about this because to them it's disinformation. To other people it's information.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I think we can all agree if people think they're getting their facts just directly from Facebook, then something's horribly wrong. But we know that. The community notes thing, I think, is quite good because that sort of first-hand experience people are putting down, aren't they?
Yeah. People have loads of different views come together, and it's an aggregate, so that's why it works.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage. Now, we now know that the Southport attacker was referred to the government's Prevent strategy 3 times, and yet the system totally failed to act. And let's take a listen to what the Prime Minister had to say about this earlier on today.
Perpetrator was referred to the Prevent programme on 3 separate occasions. A judgment was made that he did not meet the threshold for intervention. A judgment that was clearly wrong.
Now, astonishingly, that's bad enough in isolation, but this is not the first time that Prevent has failed to stop terror, even when the perpetrators were already on its radar. In 2020, Khaira Sadallah carried out the Reading attack, killing 3 people there in the park. In 2019, Usman Khan murdered 2 individuals during the London Bridge attack. And similarly, in 2021, Ali Harbi Ali took the life of course, Sir David Amos. And all of these terrorists were previously known to Prevent. Yet despite Islamist threats accounting for 75% of MI5's caseload, only 11% of Prevent referrals relate to Islamist extremism. That's a huge disconnect. So tonight the question is this: is Prevent fit for purpose, or should it be gone into the bin? I'm pleased now to be joined now by the former Prevent practitioner and the former counter-extremism coordinator, Charlotte Littlewood, as well as my panel, of course, and that is Sir Ranil Jayawardena and the journalist and former press secretary to Paddy Ashdown, Joe Phillips. So I'm going to start with you, Charlotte. Thanks for coming in and facing the music. A huge amount of questions to be asked about Prevent. How can it be the case that people are flagged, they're red flagged multiple times? People like Axel Radicabana was carrying a knife into school. He took a hockey stick into school. There were concerns about his behaviour at school. He was expelled from school time and time again, yet he was free in July last year to murder 3 girls. Is Prevent at fault?
I think when we ask the question, is Prevent at fault, that's probably too broad a question. What we know is that this was never referred up to Channel. So it didn't move from the first responders who would have got the call, possibly from the school or the home, to say we're worried about this individual. The Prevent practitioner who took that call then did not decide when filling out the form about risk, ideology, that it should be passed to Channel. So unfortunately, I think this is a very localised failing. I don't understand, considering at the time we had a mixed, unclear, unstable category, why, considering he'd engaged in various ideological inclinations, IRA, I understand, was one of them, an inclination towards mass shootings. I know that in 2019 he'd wanted to go and stab what he saw as racist bullies, so perhaps far-left extremism. These are ideological leanings. Yes, it's mixed, it's unclear, or now calling it colliding ideologies. Why was he not referred under that stream? And I think that's because that is unclear and it's misunderstood, and there needs to be a lot of training rolled out across the country on this increasing and emerging threat. You just showed us the stats to show that Islamist is not necessarily the largest threat. Actually, most of the cases have been mixed and unclear. So we need to understand that better.
Can I just ask a question, Charlotte? When you say referred up to Channel, what does that mean?
OK, so Prevent cases come in as a risk, perhaps from the school. They've had training. They've noticed that this child is maybe, or young adult, is engaging with a dangerous ideology or becoming violent towards classmates. There's a phone call. Prevent practitioner or Prevent lead takes that, fills out a risk assessment, essentially. And if they find that person to be capable of violence, holding an ideology, and a potential terrorist threat, essentially. Tick. Absolutely, tick. It then goes to the Channel panel, which is where you have safeguarding police.
OK, so
safeguarding
it's a group.
Police, a multi-faceted channel with different parts of the local authority and police sit around and decide, what do we provide for this individual? Is it mental health support? Is it specific ideological counselling?
Jail.
Yeah. Well, if they committed a crime, absolutely needs to be passed.
He took a knife into school. He was fantasising about killing people. My point is this. OK, so what you're intimating, we don't know what you're intimating, is that somebody would have... He obviously was referred 3 times, but it didn't go high enough? How can this not set every siren off on the list?
Somebody had the form to fill in and didn't fill it in correctly.
This is a bureaucratic error. A paper pusher.
Yeah, which is something that I found when I was in Prevent. We often had Prevent practitioners who had been brought in maybe from other areas, maybe the charitable sector, and been moved in and didn't quite have the grasp of radicalisation and extremism. We really need to have the top people who really understand this threat in these positions. And sometimes that was about a fear of having people who understood it perhaps too well being overzealous with referrals. So there was sometimes a dulling down of
made a racist
skills.
Joke in a playground, for example, that they're red flags straight away. Take a knife into school 3 times. Ooh, we better not pass this on. This is total incompetence, if that's the case.
I believe that this is an incompetence, yes. And I believe that the incompetence around clashing ideologies, colliding ideologies, is quite broad. And we're seeing young men in particular alone in front of the computer, not being radicalised into any particular ideology, but just being fascinated by violence. And where do we put that? Where does that land? I think it should land, in this case, definitely with Prevent. But sometimes the ideology is really unclear. Well, how come Child Services with 4 or 5 phone calls didn't pick this up? Maybe there needs to be more on people who are just fascinated with violence.
And you mentioned the IRA there. You also missed out the jihadi, the Al Qaeda manual. So you know this guy clearly was on that radar, and we know the police admitted that he watched a video of an Islamist terror attack, a stabbing, a frenzied stabbing, where the perpetrator cried Allah Akbar. That was the final video he watched before he went into that Taylor Swift dance class, and the rest is tragic history. I was going to ask you, should the entire system of Prevent be put in the bin? We've had this conversation too many times. Everyone is sick to the back teeth of the blame game. But you're saying, actually, the system is OK, but we're employing incompetent or incapable people within the lower echelons.
The system is very sophisticated. It works very well when implemented properly. We've had a review of Prevent, and it hasn't... The recommendations haven't been implemented, and today we heard about that there will be a case review. That's great, but another broad review of thresholds. William Shawcross has already looked at thresholds and made recommendations. So I do think we need to stop putting public funding into more reviews and implement what we already have.
Can I ask you the question? One of the Shawcross recommendations was that Prevent officers seem obsessed with the far right, with eking out stuff to prove the far-right threat. There's been nobody... Joe Cox, of course, was murdered by a far-right extremist, but again, you could say he was a lone wolf who was radicalised about violence, but no, he was far-right. There is an obsession, it seems, and he said this in his report, that they're looking for far-right violence, whereas actually the vast majority of actual real-world violence, the case numbers support this, is Islamism. Is this a case of, once again, like with the rape gangs, simply afraid to look for the truth in case it's racist or offensive?
Not in this case. You are right, that has been a problem. I personally experienced that as an issue. But in this case, no. It was the fact that it was mixed, unclear, and he was so incredibly violent with a very confused idea of what did he want to be? Far left, killing racists? Did he want to be IRA? Did he want to be Al Qaeda? It was the lack of clarity over where he wanted to put his violent tendencies that caused him to fall through the cracks.
But surely if he wanted to be any of those things, he should be in prison.
But isn't that the whole point that Keir Starmer was saying today, Martin, that, you know, terrorism has changed in a way because we've been looking at ticking the boxes.
Joe, I don't work for Prevent.
No, I know.
You used to. Right, if you did, would you think this guy was a danger? Yes or no?
Absolutely.
Forget about being confused about what radicalising.
No, absolutely. But what is wrong, as Charlotte's just said, is either people who, because there's not an easy box to tick, didn't. I mean, it's a bit like, you know, you go into hospital or something and somebody goes, oh, have you got chest pains? No, I'm fine. You know, but you actually fall over and die from something else. Because
it's not quite the same as a child murderer. But
that box existed, but it was removed. So mixed, unclear.
So mixed, unclear.
It did exist, but it ended up being so confusing for practitioners, they decided that it needed to be reframed. I don't know at what point that intersected.
But where is
with him?
You know, the common sense, if you like, that you've got, you know...
well, that's it. It's a civil service. It's a computer says no, bureaucratic sort of tick box exercise. There needs to be flexibility. And this is another thing I wanted to say. A massive failure here was communications. Another thing I experienced often in Prevent is there is a completely blanket sort of ban on speaking about cases. Now, obviously, if you're going to have contempt of court of an issue, that's different. Sure. But here... pre-riots, it would not have caused a problem for the investigation to have said he's not a migrant and he didn't come on the boats.
Right.
And we could have headed that off. So I think communications has been a big failure. Prevent needs to communicate better. It needs to train its practitioners better, and it needs to understand, yes, it's a developing and emerging threat of just a fascination with violence amongst particularly young men.
Yeah.
Do you know what, Charlotte Littlewood, you know, I came here tonight, you know, thinking you were the problem, or Prevent was. In actual fact, I feel very emotional about this now, because if only we had people like you on this case, the media might have told us more. these riots might not have happened, and history might be very, very different.
But Martin, you know, you could say exactly the same about Sarah Sharif. That we see it time and time again of agencies not talking to each other, as Charlotte's just said.
Our team, I think, would have put this to channel. We did stop people travelling to Syria.
You were Shamima Begum on that case earlier on, right?
Newham dealt heavily with the school where the 3 girls left from, where I was a prevent practitioner, and we stopped a young family being able to travel, and we stopped a young man whose father was worried about him putting his passport away and saving money. So it does work. In this area, it hasn't. Somebody failed on a local level.
Well, huge questions to ask, and thank you so much, Charlotte, for coming in and literally facing the music and, educating me. That was amazing. Thanks. Really mean that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Charlotte, Joe and Ranil, that was, you can say that was awesome. Thank you. Now, up next, you haven't learned, don't you? The government is under fire in Parliament today for breaking its promise to end the use of hotels to house migrants. And MPs are voicing outrage over the multi-billion-pound policy which continues to burden communities and taxpayers. Stay tuned. That's next on Farage.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. A quiet night out there with the low cloud, mist and fog becoming extensive in many places. Some rain and drizzle out of that and a frost in the north. But Storm Eowyn is starting to move across the Atlantic, and that's going to bring widespread disruption to northern and western parts of the UK by Friday. Met Office have already issued warnings on that, so I'd recommend staying up to date with the forecast. Meanwhile, relatively quiet out there. Early hours of Wednesday, we've got a lot of low cloud for England and Wales, some mist and drizzle coming through as well. Scotland and Northern Ireland, a chilly start to the day with temperatures close to freezing and a few pockets of frost where we do get lengthy clear spells, particularly eastern Scotland. Further west, a number of showers are still moving through, and so generally frost-free here. Wouldn't rule out a few patches of fog as well, first thing for Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland. But more widespread gloom is expected for England and Wales, particularly southern and central parts where we've also got persistent rain and drizzle. And that's going to slowly meander its way southeastwards through the day, with brighter skies arriving for northern and western England, parts of Wales as well. The brightest skies, though, will be across Scotland, particularly northeast Scotland. Still some showers pushing into northern and western Scotland, but also arriving into western England and Wales before the day ends. In the southeast, though, it stays gloomy and it stays on the cold side, 5 or 6 Celsius. Thursday's a chilly start to the day with a frost in places before it turns cloudy and this band of heavy rain crosses the country. Now, this isn't Storm Eowyn. Storm Eowyn turns up on Friday, likely to bring widespread gales, gusts in some places in excess of 80 miles an hour.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney. Now, Labour have come under fire again today from members of Parliament as the government are reopening venues as asylum hotels, having, of course, previously returned them to normal use. Now, the government promised in its manifesto that they will close those hotels that were being used for asylum-seeking houses. But our political editor, Christopher Hope, spoke with the Conservative MP, Jack Rankin, who secured the debate as a hotel in his constituency in Windsor has been reopened for asylum seekers after it had previously been opened back up to the public.
Jet Rankin, why are they opening a new hotel for asylum seekers in Datchet?
Well, even in the last week, in the cold weather we've got here, 762 arrivals came by boat illegally from the South Channel, 23,000 since Labour in office. That's up 29% on the period last year. So the reason communities like mine fundamentally are being affected by this is because we continue to have lost control of the English Channel and illegal crossings there. And frankly, my view is that that's because of the removal of the threat of the deterrent, Chris.
The government says it's your fault, the Tories' fault, because they say that Rwanda meant that the attempt at removing people from this country just stopped because Rwanda was a silver bullet. So they blame your government and they're clearing up the mess caused by your Tory government.
Well, the thing we need is a deterrent, right? The individual adults concerned, and in my constituency they are single adult males, they're illegal economic migrants, but they're making rational decisions arguably for themselves. What we are, we're the mugs for putting the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. We need to remove that. And that's what the Rwanda deterrent was all about. And one of their first moves in office was to pull that before it ever became into operation. And I think in the increasing numbers, 29%, I think we can point to the removal of that deterrent as a significant factor.
The hotel you're describing was opened by the Tory government, then closed by the Tory Home Office and reopened by Labour. What's it like for people living there? What's the effect on the local community?
Well, we made some progress, but obviously we've gone backwards. The Labour Party said they would close these hotels. I understand they've opened 14 in the 6 months that they've been in office, and now a third of MPs are being impacted, a third of constituencies across the UK. And if you come to Datchet, in my constituency, Datchet is a little village, 4,000 people. It's on the north bank of the Thames. It's got that quintessential green, the pub, the church. But because it's only 1.5 miles from the castle, also has a hotel. And just on the other side of the river, that's the private home park. That's where the King lives. That's where the Prince and Princess of Wales live. So if they're in communities like mine, they're in almost every community in this country, and they're affecting the NHS. And frankly, when they talk about getting rid of the backlog, they're approving 50% of these applications. So all they're doing is smearing them then into the welfare system, into whether that is social housing or whether that is the benefits bill. So we fundamentally need to make sure that we're not letting these people into our country.
And in your debate on Tuesday this week, what do you want to hear from the government?
Well, we want some answers. So things about when is this hotel shutting down, who is paying for it, what impact that's having on local services. Frankly, we got 24 hours notice in Datchet of this hotel, and that's what we're finding quite common. So we need to know what is the timetable for shutting these hotels down, what is the prioritisation list, and frankly, we also need what the government is going to do to deter these people coming to our country into the future.
There we go. Once again, the lunatics have taken over the asylum system. And joining me now is David Buckley, an independent alliance councillor from the Windsor MP's constituency. David, welcome to the show. The Labour Party promised to end asylum hotels. Instead, we've seen a 20% increase to 35,651 people in these hotels. We're still spending £3 billion a year on them. That's twice the winter fuel allowance acts. And it seems time and time again, constituencies like yours simply are dumped upon by central government. You've got no say. It suddenly becomes a local problem to a national issue. How does that make you feel?
Well, it's very disappointing. We've had this from consecutive governments. It's not just one government. It was Conservatives before that. So when we first had the asylum seekers put into the hotel in 2022, they were subsequently removed and then they've been put back in again under this new government. So it's consecutive government decisions using draconian laws by the Home Office to just plant people into our local community. You know, and I have to say, Martin, I will say this, it's not the asylum seekers who are the problem, it's the failure of our governments, consecutive governments, to stem this problem and sort it out.
I think many people watching this show would no doubt agree with that. You know, if they get to the country, because we ostensibly have open borders and roll out the red carpet, they need to be housed somewhere. But that's the point. You know, this is bad policy. It's a failure to implement strong borders by successive governments. A place like Datchet, I mean, I know Datchet. I've got a mate who lives just down the road. It's on the bank of the Thames. It's the sort of place most people in Britain couldn't dream of being able to afford a place to live. And suddenly, if you come in illegally on a dinghy, bosh, you're in one of the most beautiful parts of Britain at taxpayers' expense.
Absolutely, and we have up to 100 placements for asylum seekers, ages between 19 and 29, young men, as our MP said. But, you know, this is the problem. It falls onto local communities. These are local communities. We pay up to £75 per night, per person, for these asylum seekers. And I think your numbers are way under the numbers of really being spent by the government. You know, it's huge. And our local council are close to bankruptcy. So once these people reach their asylum claims and given asylum, they're put into the street. They're not given any help or support and have to find their way to the local town hall to be rehoused. And we as a local council have only built 6 council houses in 10 years. So where do they go? They go into temporary accommodation, which costs taxpayers a fortune.
We have to leave it there. We've simply run out of time. David Buckley, again, I'll repeat my point. The lunatics have taken over the asylum system. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, for today's What the Farage, is this the biggest U-turn in politics? Well, that's saying something, because the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, once a fierce Trump critic, is now full of praise for the president ahead of his inauguration, calling him gracious and generous. Lammy is also insisting that he, along with most of the world, is glad that Trump is back as president. The Foreign Secretary even shared how impressed he was after dining with Trump last year, describing him as warm, funny, and a strong ally for the UK, and honestly even meant it. That's a far cry from Lammy's past jabs, of course, where he branded the president a tyrant and a toupee and a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. Apart from that, he loves him. Now, up next, the government is reportedly set to announce support for a 3rd runway at Heathrow Airport within weeks. Now, this is despite the Prime Minister and several cabinet members voting against the proposal in 2018. Is this yet another U-turn, this time a flying U-turn from Sir Keir Starmer? That's next on Farage.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Some winter sunshine likely for the next couple of days in Sardinia and also Sicily, but some showers in Cyprus and some pretty wet conditions across the Canaries and Madeira for the next couple of days. The same weather system bringing soggy skies to Portugal also, and some wet weather across southern parts of France, some snow over the Alps. Showers in Cyprus, they'll still be there on Thursday, but they should be easing by Friday, and the rain in the Canaries will be easing by Friday as well, and temperatures over 20 degrees here.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the body image thing that concerns me. It's young girls watching Love Island and really skinny girls and young boys
hit the gym after this. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, they're seeing perfect bodies on the screen.
You don't need to go in the gym, Maymoon. You look gorgeous as you are, love.
I know. You see, the reason I don't enter anything like that, Kerry, is you know
you're going to win.
Exactly. And it's not fair. It's not fair, I think, on everybody else being there.
It's not fair.
No.
But, Kerry, what do you think about the body image thing? You know, when you talk about your daughter, is that something that you'd worry about, her comparing herself to the likes of what she sees on the screen?
Now, this is where there's a conflict of interest for me, because I've been brought up in this industry since I was 17, so it's massively affected me. I mean, when you're put on the front cover of magazines after having a baby with a stretch mark in the circle of shame, you know, it does do a psychological effect on you. I think a lot of celebrities who have been around for so many years as I have been affected by that. But everyone has to bear in mind, I've had my children. I'm in my 40s. I feel I'm entitled to have my tweaks and try and improve on what I think are going down south, and health and safety, tripping over any things that I don't want to be tripping over anymore. But I definitely do believe, I mean, majority of the young girls that go on Love Island, they all have the same big lips, the same big eyelashes, all the butt implants, and the barely in their 20s. You know, it's if you go to the airport now, I remember going to the airport and I looked around and all the girls looked exactly the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney. Now, the Labour Party is at war because Rachel Reeves is considering backing the creation of a third runway at Heathrow Airport, which could see £61 billion in benefits and 77,000 new local jobs. But as you'd imagine, the Environment Secretary Ed Miliband, as well as other MPs and climate activists, claim that boosting flights would be damaging for the environment. Well, who cares? But joining me now is my panel of the former Environment Secretary, Sir Ranil Jayawardena, he might care, and the journalist and the former press secretary, jet to Paddy Ashdown, Joe Phillips, and hoving interview, flying, touching down, is Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg here to my right. Let's start with you. Ranil, I'm going to start with you, Sir Ranil. This is something I know you've been passionate about before. This might be the first time you've ever agreed with Rachel Reeves. Pro-business, pro-jobs, pro-Britain, and throw net zero in the bin.
Well, let's see what she actually does. I mean, you know, there's still room for them to get out of this, but I really hope they go ahead with something that is finally pro-growth. And look, being in favour of looking after our environment need not be at the expense of going for growth. And in this case, you know, more flights taking off from the UK grows our economy, reduces the amount that we need to offshore. It can also drive the development of all sorts of things like sustainable aviation fuels. I know Jacob might disagree with even the premise of that, and that's fine. But the point is, we can develop these sorts of technologies as well. And, you know, fundamentally, the people who live around Heathrow, they benefit hugely from the economy that has developed around the airport. I accept we might not start from this place, and that Heathrow might not be the place, if you were starting all over again, to build a leading international airport. But it is where it is, and we should capitalise on it. Frankly, a third runway isn't enough. We should be building the fourth.
Boris Johnson hated the prospect. Zach Goldsmith, when he says London Mayor, campaigned against it. Yeah. So you're as split on this issue as the Labour Party.
Fine. But I've always been very, very clear that we should be building a third and a fourth runway at Heathrow. In fact, if we want to build another one at Gatwick, if we want to build another one at Boris Island as well, great. We should be making Britain the heart of global aviation once again. Heathrow used to be a fantastically important airport. We're losing that to airports in Europe and indeed in the Middle East. So we should do everything possible to regain that, because if we can be at the heart of that aviation network, we're creating jobs for our people. We're going to boost business in every corner of this country, thanks to regional flights as well. And, you know, that is good news for whoever is in government. So, you know, I wish them well and, you know, crack on.
Channeling your inner Sir Richard Branson there. Joe Phillips, presumably you think this is a bad idea? It's going to kill the environment, but it's going to create a lot of jobs.
Well, it may well create a lot of jobs, but I do find it astonishing that Rachel Reeves is toying with this idea when she is going to have opposition from so many people within her own party, not least of all Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. I mean, Boris Johnson famously...
Perish the thought London should prosper. Perish the thought more business authorities would come into the city.
Boris Johnson said he would lay down in the road to stop the bulldozers. I mean, maybe we could tempt him back from his wealthy retirement to come and do that. I'd drive the bulldozer very happily. But I actually think, you know, yes, it's fine, and I hear everything that you say. I live in Kent. There is Manston Airport with the longest runway in the country that has been sitting there tied up in planning and appeals.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
It's not. You've got high-speed link that could get you to London within under 2 hours. You could actually do
2 hours? 2 hours? The flights are longer than that, but
we might as well come from Bristol.
Yeah, under an hour and a half, you could go direct to London And you would create jobs in a really, really deprived part of the country.
I'm sorry, but this is the sort of argument that has made Britain's economy half of what it could be. You know, this idea of, oh, let's not take the difficult decisions. Let's not accept that there will be people in Parliament who are against this, and we're going to have to go against some people in our own party, against the national interest. You know, the fact that Manston's there, great, crack on. It doesn't mean you don't build Heathrow. And, you know, the idea that other people have put forward of, oh, well, we don't need to do this because we're building HS2, we'll hive it all to Birmingham.
Well,
all nonsense.
Look at what we've done on HS1, Ranald. You know, we haven't got the stations that were paid for by public funding reopened since COVID.
OK, Joe, let me now bring in Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. So, Heathrow chocks away or put the brakes on?
Oh, build, baby, build. And not just, as Ranald says, one more runway, two more runways, and what about an extra runway at Gatwick? That we need air capacity. I'm not in the least bit interested in the emissions argument. I'm interested in people having holidays that they enjoy and business travellers being able to get around the world. That puts us back at the centre of business. It's a really good idea. I strongly support Rachel Reeves in doing this. And Labour has a majority.
Did you just say that?
Yes, I did.
I strongly support Rachel Reeves.
Yeah,
make a note.
Yeah, Red Rachel. Dodgy Rachel.
That probably means it won't happen.
Well, but they've got the majority to force it through, and the Mayor of London doesn't matter a rare beans. I mean, who cares what he thinks? The government can push this through. We are, I'm glad to say, a unitary country. We have this pretend devolution to mayors. They might as well put on all those chains and fur robes and dress up in funny hats for all the power that they've really got when they take on national government.
OK, we've got a quick 45 seconds to Jacob Rees-Mogg. State of the Nation is up next. What's on your menu, sir?
Inevitably, we're talking about Southport and why the government didn't tell us the truth. Why were we misled? Why are they hiding behind sub judice? Joshua Rosenberg is coming on to explain how sub judice really works. And we're going to talk about the great Trump. What could we learn? What could we see from what he's done? He's got rid of all the people on equality, diversity, and all that. He's fired them. Could we do that here? It's really exciting, showing the raw power of democratically mandated government, whilst we still seem to be operated by the blob.
There we go, and indeed his pronouns could be common and sense. He's completely blown this all out of the water. It's only day one. What an astonishing turn of events. So Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you very much. Of course, State of the Nation is next. Sir Ranald J. Wardener, thank you very much and well done. And are you a sir? Sir Joe Phillips? You are now.
I'm just a commoner.
Thank you very much to all of you. State of the Nation is up next. I'm back tomorrow 3 till 6. First is your weather, and it's Aidan McGibbon.